So let's get going. Thank you all for joining us. Jonah had some family affairs that he had to tend to, so he won't be joining us tonight. If you haven't figured out, this is not Jonah in your video screen right now. He sends his regards and is disappointed to be missing tonight. And we're going to jump right into it so we can maximize our time with Coach Walsh. When we first started talking about topics that we wanted to dive into as we built out these conversations, and the topic of leadership obviously came up, Coach Walsh immediately came to our minds as a must-have presenter. The success he has had and contributed to at every stop in his coaching career is a testament to the fact that he indeed has focused on the most important piece of coaching, in my opinion, that being leadership and the development of the leaders in your program. We all know if you're going to win at the level that Coach has, you need some talent. That's a given. However, if you don't have the leadership from the top down, even an accumulation of all the talent in the world will have you coming up short. So many in our profession talk about the importance of leadership, yet way too many of us don't make it a priority it needs to be. I'm personally very grateful to have been a part of his Dynamic Leadership Academy, and I never miss an episode of his Dynamic Leadership podcast or read one of his blogs as well. Coach Walsh is one of the best in the business, in my opinion, in athletics when it comes to leadership and the impact it can have on your organization and your team culture. Thanks again, Coach, for joining us and making the time to speak with us this evening. I'm going to make sure right now that I have it where you can share your screen. And then I'm going to turn it over to you. Who can share the screen? All participants. You should have access to be able to share the screen. And Coach, thanks again and take it away.
Appreciate it, Tommy. Thank you. That was too kind. And I appreciate everybody's time and the opportunity to have a discussion. And I'd love to have a discussion as Tommy talked about. I mean, leadership has kind of become a passion of mine really since I became a head coach. And that's kind of where I sort of discovered the value of it. And also the fact that I really don't think we necessarily teach it the way we should, if it is as important to us as we say it is. So I'm going to share my screen here so we can go through. I have a little PowerPoint that I can certainly share with everybody. So if there's something I say that you want to, you want a copy of, or notes or anything like that, I can certainly share with, this with the whole group and stay in touch. My contact information is on there. My goal is to hopefully hear from you about your approach to leadership and some things that you guys do and create a conversation. So as I'm going through it, if you have any questions or something sounded good, sounded bad, didn't make sense, just feel free to speak up. I don't care if you jump in, so we can have a back and forth. Just a little background on how I kind of got here. I grew up in New York. I went to a Division III school, Hamilton College in Central New York. I graduated in '94, started coaching actually while I was there, played for 2 years, and then worked as a student assistant. And I've been fortunate enough to be, on a bench, in a gym as a, hopefully you have as well, since I got out of college. Was a grad assistant at Iona College, spent 1 year at the University of San Diego, then was fortunate enough when Tim Walsh got the Providence job in the late 90s, I went back to PC with him. 2005, I left Providence to take over Rhode Island College. And that was when I realized as a head coach that, I was a typical assistant coach, wanted to be a head coach, had all sorts of binders and notes and offenses and how we were going to play and what it was going to look like. And I realized when I became a head coach that 75% of what I talked to my team about was not about basketball. It was not about X's and O's. It was about leadership. It was about approach. It was about mentality. And that wasn't just when I was talking to them in a meeting. I'm talking about on the practice floor, in a huddle, during a game. So much of it revolved around leadership, yet leadership was this sort of undefined notion that we all talked about, but I wasn't really sure, you know, how we defined it, how we taught it, whether or not we taught it. And when I first became a head coach, that was kind of my baptism was, okay, I better figure this out, right? I better figure out what I'm saying, how I'm motivating people, how I'm connecting, how I'm creating buy-in, all that stuff. So um, I started to study it basically, and I started as a Division III coach. We had some success. I had, the off seasons weren't as busy. Our kids weren't around during the summer. So I started to really, try and study it and figure out sort of the ins and outs of leadership and what could be taught and why weren't we teaching it. And in conversations with other coaches, I'd go work camps in the summer and I'd see other coaches, hey, what type of years you have? We didn't have a great year, and, we won 12 games, and, we were kind of young, and inevitably, you'd hear the word leadership. Yeah, we didn't have great leadership, and I would think to myself, well, man, like, if it's that important, right? And obviously it's one of the reasons we give as to why we have success or why we don't have success. What are we doing to teach it, and how are we defining it? So, I'd ask you to start with what is your definition of leadership? Fill in that blank. And it's interesting when I have conversations like this with teams or leadership development programs that I do kind of as my side business. You put this out there to athletes and you get, hundreds of different answers, so if you were to fill in that blank, what would you fill in that blank as far as leadership is? Leadership is what? So does anybody have a specific definition that you use for leadership or that you use with your teams that you'd want to share with the group? And it doesn't have to be something that, is thought out. It could be, just fill in the blank. What's a word that you use to fill in that blank as far as leadership?
I would say leadership is a process.
Process.
I know for me,
I love it.
what I say about leadership is what I want in others, I need to be willing to do myself.
So it's an example, so to speak.
Yes,
What you do
yeah,
has to be an example.
for sure. Yep.
Anybody else? Any other words that come to mind when you see that blank right there? So for me, because I think it's important, right? I think leadership is an essential core value on high performing teams, and I think we go to it a lot as coaches. I think it's really important that you have a definition, right? It's very hard to, we use a lot of words in the industry, and I call them buzzwords, right? Toughness, energy, compete, leadership is one of them. We talk to our teams about being tough all the time, but do we define it for them, or do we just say, hey guys, we got to be tougher? The compete level, right? Do we define what competing is, or do we just say you got to compete harder? I think we tell our teams often we need more leadership, right? But we don't necessarily define it. So, two ways I would ask you to look at leadership. One is that I think it's highly contextual, situational. I think if there's 15 coaches on this call, you might have 15 different definitions, right? It depends on the situation you are in. The leadership model that worked for me at Rhode Island College in 2005 might not work for you in your current situation. It might not work at Providence College, where I am today. So understand there isn't one definition. It depends on context, really matters. The second thing is to see leadership as a skill and not a rank. And this is probably the biggest issue I have with the most common leadership model, the traditional leadership model that I don't really think is most effective, is that we see leadership as a rank, right? We see it as a position of status. We don't see it as a skill. I think leadership is a skill that you can teach the way you teach passing, the way you teach ball handling, the way you teach blocking out. And I think it's important that we look at it that way. Some people are better at it than others, just like some of your shooters are better than others, or, you know, some of your point guards are better passers than others, but it's a skill you can work on. And if it's important to your program, I think you should work on it. And you have to have a definition. So my definition of leadership for the teams that I've coached has always been make the people around you better. That's what leadership is to me. So I would hope that if you walked into our locker room at Rhode Island College or at Maine when I was the head coach there, and you asked them what it meant to be a leader, they would say making my teammates better, right? We required it of everyone, and I thought that was an important part to get sort of the rank out of the equation, right? Everybody is required to be a leader. It's not something we're hoping for, something you do if you're good at, and you do it in your own way. And the reason why I like that definition, and I would encourage you to come up with your own that fits your personality, it's three things. It's simple, it's concise, and it's accessible. It's accessible to everybody. And I think that's really important. I think so often we see leadership as this goal that we have to try and attain when we become a senior, or we become a starter, or we become a better player. I want a definition that's accessible to everybody, right? So everybody can make their teammates better. So everyone's got to do it. No one's asked to do it more than others. And it needs to really fit your core values, right? Your personality as a leader, whatever that definition is, right? It's certainly very general. Like I said, it's highly contextual, but it works for me because it's accessible to everybody. And then leadership becomes something that everybody has to do, just like being on time for practice, right? Just like working on your skills in the off season, just like lifting 3 days a week, or whatever it is your program is doing. For us, leadership is a part of it. So I think it's an important core value. I have a hard time finding too many coaches who've been a part of high performing teams who don't value leadership in some form. Certainly it comes in different shapes and sizes, and some value it more than others. But an important aspect for me is to see it as a behavior, right? Leadership is a behavior. Leadership is not what you say, it's what you do, right? So, I love the phrase, what you do is so loud, I can't hear what you say. We all have players on our teams who, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I was late for class this morning, but you know me, coach, I never do that, right? Well, you did it this morning. So, what you do is a lot louder than what you say. And so I would encourage you to define your core values and define leadership as behavior, right? It just like toughness, telling my team to be tough is one thing. Showing them video of a guard turning the ball over and then immediately sprinting back on defense and getting a deflection on a pass that saves a layup, right? To me, that's tough, right? That's what I want to see. So you can do the same with leadership, right? Define your values in behavioral terms so that they're more than just talk, and they become really worth fighting for, something your team can hold on to. What does it look like? And again, I get back to the personality of you as a coach, your coaching staff, and everyone on your team. For certain players, leadership might fit the traditional speaking up, loud voice, come on team, let's go, let's get together, let's compete, rally cry type leadership. For somebody who's really quiet and introverted, he's not going to be able to lead that way. And that's okay. And man, if that's not something I learned, as I was going through this as a head coach, we spend a ton of time, I think, trying to force leadership on people in certain ways that makes them uncomfortable. And I think that has a negative impact on the model. So everybody can do it differently. You know, it might be just showing up 15 minutes early to practice to get extra work in, right? Your teammates see that, man, that's how we do things around here. Okay, I'm going to get there 15 minutes early. That's leadership, right? You know, your teammate misses a layup, you know, hey, get back on defense. It's all right. We'll get it back. Let's go, right? That's leadership. Off the court, right? You know, hey, we got to get to study hall. Let's make sure we're on time, right? We got to get to study hall and get our hours in before, you know, Thursday at 8. You know, knocking on your you know, teammate's door to make sure he's up for an early practice, right? Leadership comes in so many different forms and it can easily fit everybody's personality. I think our job as coaches is to allow them to lead in a way that fits their personality. I mean, how many coaches have struggled trying to get, you know, somebody to speak up, right? Somebody who's a junior or senior who's been around, and you say, you know, come on, Tim, let's go. I need you to talk more. You know, we pull teeth and fight and claw. And look, we're going through it with a kid who's a 50-year senior. You know, had this very conversation with my boss today. You know, we need him to talk more. And the kid is just, he's a droid. He's a quiet kid. He just doesn't speak up. Now, that's not to say he shouldn't be calling out a screen when a screen's coming, right? Or he's not talking about who he's guarding in transition. I mean, that's required, but he's not a guy that's going to walk into the locker room and say, all right, fellas, he's just not going to do it. He's not comfortable. It doesn't fit his personality. And I think we have to recognize that as coaches. So there's plenty of different ways to lead. It's different for everybody. It has to fit their personality. And what it does is it creates standards. And hopefully, and we'll get into this moving forward, hopefully it creates standards that your guys, your team can hold each other accountable to, right? You know, we don't do that here, right? Is one of the most powerful phrases, right? That's not how we operate. You know, if your players are talking in that type of language, I think you have a pretty powerful culture. So I always ask teams and players this, you know, who are the leaders on your team? And I tell most players that I talk to or most coaches, you know, I can probably tell you who 90% of your leaders are, right? There are three things. They're older players, they're better players, and they're louder players. Most leaders of most teams fall into those three categories, if not all three of them, at least two of the three. They're veteran players, they're juniors and seniors, they're good players. You know, you hear a lot, well, I'm not sure he can be a leader because he's not a starter, or because, you know, guys don't respect him because he doesn't play that much. And I think I have a huge issue with that part of the traditional model. And they're the guys who are willing to speak up. You know, we all have guys on our team that, you know, love to hear their own voice and are willing to speak up. And some of that is positive, but there are a lot of guys who are speaking up and it's not positive, but those guys take on a leadership role because they're willing to speak. So again, I would ask you to think of it as a skill and not a rank. I don't think being older, better, or louder makes you a better leader. It can certainly contribute to your ability to lead without question, right? Your willingness to speak up when things aren't going well, your experience as a junior or senior, having played 2 or 3 years and been through the battles, certainly it matters and it contributes, but it doesn't necessarily make you a better leader. Again, it's a skill I think you can develop. It's not a position that you achieve. And on the best teams that I've ever coached, you know, the answer to who are the leaders in this room is everybody, right? That's who the leaders are. There is no rank system. So that gets me into captains. And I'm well, first of all, are there any thoughts or questions on anything? I don't want to just keep talking. Any thoughts, questions, ideas that you have that you've connected to with any of the stuff that I've said?
Hey, Coach, I had one for you
Yes.
with regards to, I like how I think a lot of us do this, who really focus on leadership, what it looks like. But I was wondering if you also maybe define what it doesn't look like, or have you not done that, or why you would or wouldn't do that? I know some people start to do that, and I've given it thought, but I just wondered what your opinion on was that, like just defining that.
Yeah, I try not to, I don't do that. I don't try and define the negative, but because I don't know, and maybe this is what you're saying, but um, leadership isn't necessarily always positive, right? It can be, now, if you define it the right way, it should be, but I think we've all coached guys who are leading people in the wrong direction, right? Or maybe they're selfish and they're not concerned with their teammates, and when they speak up, it's only to make their situation better. So I don't define the negative side of it really, because I want there to be just a broad understanding of what leadership is, and because it's defined for us as making people better. If I would say to somebody, is that making us better? Like, is that making your teammate better? Like, he missed the layup and you just cursed at him. Like, is that making us better? And that might be an example of what leadership isn't. So maybe I just go about it in a little bit of a different way. Do you feel like can you give me an example where defining what it isn't,
Well,
you feel like it's helpful?
no, I think honestly, like I like what you said. It was more so that they were just saying, like, with everything in your program, more so like what it looks like and what it doesn't. So maybe not, and the way you said it about leadership, like, why do you kind of want to put the negative look on it? We kind of know what it is, and I like how you said it. But and as you said that, I wonder now, like, do I want to define what things don't look like, or do I want to just focus on what they do look like? And like you said, then you could just simply say, hey, is that the standard? Is that what we do? And it's kind of saying the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would go to our definition, which is,
Mhm.
like, okay, is that making us better?
Yeah.
Like, is that really what we're looking for? Um, but yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. Look, you know, there are so many different avenues to go down this road. I don't think there's one way. Like, there's one way that's worked for me. Um, it worked at Rhode Island College. It was a great fit. It took a lot longer at the University of Maine to kind of get over the hump. But like I said, it's highly contextual. So it's not like, hey, there's one thing and this is, I think you're failing once you start to think that, oh yeah, I've got leadership figured out. So uh, how do we feel about captains? I'm always interested in this one.
Yeah, that was going to be a question of mine. I was reading, and I was going to ask you, what are your thoughts as far as? Well, I'm at New Haven now, and we purposefully did not or choose not to elect captains because we feel like specifically what your slide says, others lead less. They
Right.
feel like the captains should take onus and have the final say over the whole team.
So is that now? So that's a choice made as, hey, we want leadership out of everybody, not
Exactly.
one out of
Right. We don't want to just
right.
appoint
So,
someone and you make the decision.
Right. So it's interesting. I think if you're making the decision not to have captains based on the fact that you don't feel like you have good leadership or nobody, quote unquote, deserves it, I think you have an issue with your team, right? Which is you just don't, you don't feel like you either haven't developed or you don't have the right leadership. If it's a model where it's like, what, I don't want anybody to be different. I don't want anybody to feel like, okay, they're a senior and they're a captain, so everyone's supposed to listen to them. I think that's pretty powerful. Is this the first year you've done this, or is it year to year you guys have never really picked captains?
Yeah. Well, since Ted Hotelin's been the head coach here, I believe he's implemented the no captain rule just because he wants everybody to be equal, from walk on to full scholarship guys. Everyone's treated equal in the program and has an equal voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because captain it has a status to it, right? And it kind of goes against what I was talking about. So my thought on captains is similar. I feel you have to have them, right? So not necessarily, they could be game to game, right? But somebody has to go out and meet with the officials. Do you guys rotate who that is? Do you
Exactly. It's
Okay.
usually our older guys, but we usually rotate guys every once in a while. Somebody.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, I came back to work for Ed Cooley at Providence this year, and last year he never named captains. He just never talked about it. So it wasn't like he said, well, we're not going to have captains because, I want everybody to lead. We just went into the games, and when the refs blew the whistle and said, hey, captains, 2 or 3 of our guys who were, they were the older guys, we had 5 seniors, they went over there. And I think part of that was we had 5 seniors, and he didn't want to sort of have to delineate or pick and choose. I also think 1 or 2 of those seniors didn't necessarily fit with what he thought as a leader, even though they were good players. So it was interesting. And then this year, about a week ago, he said to the guys after practice, he said, all right, I want to know who you guys expect the captains to be. And he pointed to one guy and he said, that's my pick right there. So, my thought is this: when we always had captains, I do think it is important to the players. A lot of times they like, for a junior or a senior to earn that badge, so to speak. We would have captains, and I would define their responsibilities as technical. Somebody has to meet with the officials before the games. Somebody is allowed by rule to ask questions of the official during the game. Your speaking captain. If we have media responsibilities, we may go to the captains for that. If practice changes, hey, remind everybody practice is at 2:00 instead of 1:00. But it's technical responsibilities only. Being a captain does not involve leadership responsibilities, because I just feel like if you're asking your captains to lead, you're asking others to do it less. So we had a selection process that we used, which we would get everybody into a room. I would explain the responsibilities of the captain. Now, I understand that they still felt like, okay, being a captain had some status and gave them some voice, because that's what the traditional captain does. But I made sure they understood that didn't give them a louder voice or more ability to lead. Everybody was going to lead. And then we voted for captains. The players voted. We sat in a room, and I said, if you want to be considered to be a captain, get up and write your name on the board. So anyone who wanted to be considered by their teammates to be a captain had to get up and write their name up on the board in the front of the room. 5 or 6 guys would get up and do that. It's interesting what you see there, because it's a little bit different to have to get up in front of your teammates and say, okay, I want to be your captain, than to just, hand out a piece of paper and let people write your name down 8 times and you got 8 votes. And it's like, okay, I'm the captain. Then we would let anybody nominate one of their teammates to be a captain. So if somebody didn't get up and they felt like, I want to nominate that person to be our captain, you could write somebody else's name up on the board. And then the third thing was, if your name is up on the board and you do not want to be considered to be captain, go erase it. So everything had to be done in front of the team. There was that always created some interesting scenarios. There was always a guy that I think a lot of people expected to be a captain who didn't write their name up on the board. And then there would be some saying, maybe one of his teammates would say, hey, and I had this happen with a kid, the kid whose name you see on the screen, Mike Akinrola. Somebody else would put his name up there, but then I think other people, weren't sure if they should vote for him for captain because he didn't put his own name up there, So anyway, the third step is you can erase your name if you want. And then you had to write the only names you could pick were names up on the board. So if your name wasn't up on the board, you weren't being considered for captain. And then everybody voted, and whoever got, a majority of the votes, usually if it was 2 or 3 guys got more than half the votes, they would be captains. So it kind of made them own the process a little bit and sort of, be willing to step up and say, and you would have, what it did was it kind of it showed you who really embraced it. You know, some guys you didn't expect to put their name up there did. And then some guys who you thought, you know, were well respected and you thought would be would want to be captains, and they wouldn't put their name up there. So Mike Akinrola, when he was a senior, he played for me at Rhode Island College. He was first team all league as a junior and a senior. He's the best center in the league. He wasn't a very vocal kid, but he played his ass off. He cared. He just didn't, you know, he wasn't a loud guy, wasn't a communicator, had never really had the responsibility. He wanted to be our best player. And he didn't put his name up on the board, you know, and a couple other guys did. And then, you know, he left it up there. He didn't erase it, but he didn't get votes to be a captain. And I realized for a year and a half, ever since he was a junior, it was like trying to force something down his throat that he didn't want to eat, you know? And I was like, why am I spending so much time trying to get this kid to be what I think a leader should be, instead of trying to get the most out of him? And I think it's a big mistake we make, right? We sort of try and put everybody in a box as a leader, and we say, you need to be more vocal, right? You need to speak up. You need to get the guys going. You need to do this. You need to lead by example, whatever it is. And if they're not comfortable with it, you're actually making them worse, you know? And finally, I realized with Mike, probably December of his senior year, I was like, you know what? We need you to set the standard for being a great player. So that's how hard you work. That's how hard you compete. That's how you prepare, blah, blah, blah. And he did that. I mean, he was one of those guys that changed the way we practiced just by how hard he went. That was his way of leading. And one of his teammates, Antone Gray, who is now, he's an assistant at Brown right now, and he was an assistant for me at Maine. He played for me for 4 years at Rhode Island College. He's the smartest player I've ever coached. He's the best leader by far I've ever coached. And when he was a freshman, he started as my point guard, and you would watch him play, and like he glowed when he had a basketball. Like he knew where everybody was. He would come by the bench and be like, Coach, we got to get Jake a shot. You know, I'd be like, all right, get Jake a shot. Like he had such a great feel. But like January of his freshman year, he came to me and he was like, yeah, I'm just not comfortable speaking up because I don't feel like this is my team. You know, like it's the older guy's team. And that's when I was kind of like, okay, something's wrong with the model, right? Like here's a kid who he has the ball in his hands. He's a terrific leader. The guys love playing with him. Like it wasn't like he was, you know, intruding on them and telling them stuff. Like he's a stud, but he didn't feel comfortable because, so here I am, I'm trying to force leadership on a senior who doesn't want to do it. And I'm taking away the ability of a freshman who's terrific at it. I'm sure you've all coached teams where you had a freshman or a sophomore who was a better leader than, you know, some of your older players who didn't want to do it. And I don't mean you let those older guys off the hook, right? You just find a way for them to lead that fits their personality. You know, for Big Mike, it was the way, like if you weren't, you know, playing hard in nickel and dime or half court offense or whatever, like he was killing you. Like it was just, he would physically abuse you and he'd let you know about it. And like that changed the level of the way we practiced. That was the way he led. So,
hey coach.
Yes.
You kind of got into it, but and knowing Tone well, and he is everything that you said, but especially because of that conversation you had with him, I wanted to ask you, in essence, how did you go about supporting him, or what are your thoughts on how you go about supporting a freshman as a leader? Because you're so right, and especially sometimes when you're taking over a program, maybe it's someone you're bringing with you or have recruited who you know is like going to do it your way, and it's perfect for them to be the leader. But all the dynamics that you just spoke of, how do you go about supporting that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it starts with the definition, right? So like, that's when I really started to say, you know what, like we need to talk about what leadership is. And that's why it's required of everybody, right? So it's just when we constantly talk about it, it's like your rank on this team has nothing to do with it, right? How many points a game you scored, how old you are, that has nothing to do with it. That's really important, I think. and we're going through this at Providence right now. I think you have to talk to them about the guys that you have to talk to them about who they are willing to listen to, right? Like as a group, like, are you guys, if a freshman tells you to do something and he's telling you the right thing to do and he does it the right way and it's going to help us, are you going to accept it? Right? Are you willing to deal with it? So the kid that Ed Cooley pointed to and said, that's my captain, is a walk-on for us. And he never plays. And he's far and away the best leader in the gym. I mean, he is, like, if you came to our practice, you would look at him and go, man, like, you want to hire that kid, right? Like, that's what it is. Like, you're going to tell somebody in finance, like, hire that kid. He's a stud. He knows where everybody should be, constant energy, always positive, picking his teammates up, but we have really, quite honestly, I mean, we have a model where somebody who doesn't play has a hard time leading, and it's kind of accepted. It's like, yeah, well, that's, it's just tough for him because he's not out there. I think you really have to hammer down on it with your guys and talk to them about, like, deep down, does it matter to you that, Andrew doesn't play if what he's telling you is helping you get better, and have that conversation, and then the other thing is, I mean, you use the word support, right? Like, if it's making the team better and you continue to encourage it, I think the guys are going to accept it. Like, if I'm stopping practice saying, Antone, you got to speak up, what are you trying to tell Jake there? Jake's our, senior first team all league player. Like, what do you, Jake, you got to run back. Jake, is he right? Yeah. Okay. Like, you've got to almost break it down to the point where it's like, that's acceptable. And I think the communication model is really important. And like, literally, it's a conversation about the conversation, right? It's communicating about how we're going to communicate. What we do is intense. What we do is in sound bites, right? We don't have a time to call a team meeting every time we need to talk about, with 7 minutes to go against Amherst, what we're going to do. Like, sometimes it's going to be said with intensity. Sometimes it's going to be said with emotion. And we have to be willing to accept that. Are you willing to accept that? So, starts with the model, getting guys to understand that, being a senior doesn't give you a louder voice. You've also got to make sure they're doing it in the right way. With Antone, it was easy because, like I said, he's the best I've ever seen at it. And there's no close second. The way people respond to his natural approach is just, is fascinating. So, any other thoughts, interesting thoughts about captains?
Yeah, I think, Bob, I mean, you hit it on the head. I think that the players need to know that there's many skills that you have, on the court, but also a skill to being a leader. And kids have to understand the importance of, this kid's a great dribbler, or this kid's a great passer, or this kid's a great defender. But if a kid's a great leader, the players have to understand that that is a skill, and that is just as important as many other assets and many other facets of the game. So I think it's something that players need to know, because they all need to know the why. So
right.
Why is it important that he has a voice? Because he's got a skill that's just as important.
And it's a great way to put it, right? I mean, would you not accept a pass from Antone if he's leading you on the break for a layup because he's a freshman, right? I mean, that's his basketball skill.
I hope that got that player on your bench if they did.
Right. You know what I mean? But that's a great point, right? It's a skill just like passing the ball. Well, if he throws you a dime for a layup, are you going to say, well, high school in Newport forever, right in my backyard where I live. And I had 5 guys who played for him, who played for me, and were leaders in different ways. Like Cam Stewart, coach, was one of the best players I've ever coached, but he wasn't he wasn't your typical, loud in your face leader. He was a guy who did everything right, the right way. He was really smart, and he would say stuff to you kind of subtly and kind of, on the side. And like, Mason Choice was a kid who was first team all league 3 years in a row, who had an edge to the way he played, kind of led with that ferocity and how tough he was, but wasn't necessarily curious about his teammates in that way. It was just sort of like, wanted to win, was a great teammate, but he was more thinking about what he needed to do to just crush the other team. So yeah, there are a lot of different ways to lead. Anybody else with interesting thoughts about captains, or how you feel about captains, or how you go about choosing them?
Was there ever a situation with how you picked captains where you didn't, I don't, didn't like or didn't agree with who they picked, or did you just always roll with it and just support it the best you can because of the model anyway about basically everybody making others better?
No, it's a great question. Yes, absolutely, because I still think most people are brought up on the typical leadership model, which is the top-down model, which is, what I'm going to kind of get into now is about what I think we're trying to eliminate. But, you have kids who, because they're loud and because they're better players, the rest of the team feels like, okay, those guys, should be the leaders. So yes. And look, if you believe in the model and you believe in the process, which I do, then you deal with it. Like I don't, it's not, because again, they don't have a louder voice than anybody else. They just go get to shake hands with the official before the games. Look, if somebody is starting to lead the wrong way, then I think you have to challenge that, right? If somebody's constantly negative and his voice is always, bringing people down and hammering people, or selfish or whatever. I always like my second team at Rick, my first 2 teams at Rick, but my second team was the year we went to the Elite Eight. We had 6 seniors, and I would say, one of them was really what you'd consider a great leader, and the other ones, and even coach, when Cam was a senior, we had Cam Stewart and Bobby Bailey and Terrell Hill and Kasim Johnson were all, really all league players and Hall of Famers, like great players, but none of them were like your typical, okay, I'm the captain, I'm in charge type leader. So ultimately the leadership is up to you, right? If you're not getting it out of your players. So I've never shied away from who they chose as their leader. It told me a lot about the team. I think there's value in knowing who they're willing to listen to, even if it's somebody that you think might take them the wrong way every now and then. You've just got to, be aware of it. So,
Coach, I've got just a couple more questions on your process for that.
Yes.
So, first, did you do that? When did you do that? Did you do that at Rhode Island? What year did you do it? And then also, what time of year? Like, did you do that? Okay, so first practice October 15th. Did you wait? Did you do it then? Did you wait till before your first game, middle of the year? Can you talk about that part of the process? And then I guess the last thing would be what type of, and you alluded to this a little bit already, but you start to see themes that emerge. So over time, 2, 3, 4, 5 years into that, did you see, were there less guys that went up and put their name on the board? Were there less, did some of that stuff already get established within the program because the returners knew, hey, this is how our process works. And so these are the guys, and how much of that kind of evolved within the program in and of itself?
Yeah, really good thoughts and questions. So it wasn't until my 3rd year that I actually kind of figured that out, right? So my 3rd year was the year that Antone Gray was a freshman, and I kind of realized that this model doesn't work. The first couple of years, it was just, okay, let's vote for captains. So it was really my 3rd year where it was like, it was the end of the 2nd year going into my 3rd year where it was like, I really have to start thinking about this. As far as when to do it, I usually waited until like a week before the first game. So it was always in the fall. It was always after the preseason. It was always after, about a month of practice, kind of, I just wanted there to be as much information out there for the guys as possible. Like, if you do it on September 5th, I'm just not sure. I'm not sure they know each other well enough yet, as far as that year's team, so to speak. You'll probably get the two guys who are your returning seniors who started last year to be the captains. So I liked, but I'm interested in other thoughts on that. I liked getting through the preseason, going through practice. My SID would be coming and saying, "Hey, do you know who the captains are? And I'd say, "Nope, we're gonna," and then a week before the game, somewhere in there say, "Guys, we need to have captains for technical responsibilities," and get into it. As far as the third question, it's interesting. I would say it probably created more people going up and putting their name on the board. I think it empowered some people who didn't feel like I'm the loudest guy in the room or I'm the oldest guy. Like, you would usually get one or two people where you'd be like, huh, like, that's interesting. Like, I never thought, this sophomore who is, was our sixth man last year, looks at himself that way. So it to me, it made it more open. I think as the model evolved and guys got used to it, it was sort of like, okay, that's not really a position of power. It's more technical responsibility. Now, recognizing it's still in their mind, it emoted status for sure. It always does. It's like your starters. I can say I don't care who starts, but they care who starts. And even if you don't want them to, like, it matters. So that's kind of how it went with us.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Anything else on captains? So the model that I'm trying to get to is kind of the traditional model of top down. I don't think it works. I don't think it's as effective, right? Head coach, couple of assistants, 2 or 3 senior leaders, you're the captains. Well, this is your team, and everybody else sort of falls in line behind you. I learned over, my first 3-4 years as a head coach that you would get the most out of your players by letting them be themselves, but by and encouraging them to take an active role. I think you want to create an environment where I think being a great leader involves courage and curiosity. I think you have to have the courage to be, strong in your convictions and what you believe in as far as what makes, can make other people better. And I think you have to be curious about your teammates and what's in their best interest and what's going on in their heads. And some people aren't, it's great players that aren't. Mike Akinrola just wasn't that curious. He wasn't sitting there thinking about how Antone was feeling that day. Mason Choice was another one. And that's in no way to say they're selfish. Terrell Hill, another great player, Hall of Famer, like, not selfish, but he showed up every day and got his work done and was like out there to kill you in practice. Like, that was it. That was all he was thinking about. So the goal for me is to empower the middle, right? To lead from within the program. There's a great YouTube. I don't know if anybody's seen or heard of the book by David Marquet called Turn Your Ship Around. He was a Navy commander of a sub, and the book was okay, but if you go to YouTube and put in Greatness by David Marquet, it's about 10 minutes long, and it's just an explanation of his leadership approach. And it's interesting because on a Navy sub, you would think the opposite, right? You would think chain of command and I'm in charge and I give orders and it's the military and that's what we do. And he found just the opposite. Like, he wanted to get, like he part of it is like, it's a joke that, like, every time somebody, wanted to do something, they had to run over to him and in this very formal way say, "Captain, can I have permission to do this?" And he would say, "Yes, you have permission to do that." And then they would run back and do it, So, but it makes me think about, our point guards, like getting the information into and the power to make decisions into the hands of the decision makers, the primary stakeholders. Like, so creating that model where, everybody can lead from within, I think leads to more ownership, which I think is the highest level of investment you can get. Your freshmen, your sophomores, like everybody takes a piece of it and they become accountable to one another. You all of a sudden your sophomore, when your senior is jogging back on defense, isn't afraid to say, hey, come on, man. Like, you got to run back every time, like you're not, you're not better than us. Like that's what we need. So, it creates merit. And we talked about our program as a meritocracy. Where you're known by what you do and that's it, right? It doesn't matter if you were all league last year. What have you done for this program today? Merit, I think, is a currency exchanged amongst elite teams. We earned it in 3 ways: compete, produce, and be a great teammate, right? Those 3 things were what earned merit in our program.
Hey, Coach.
Yeah.
Quick question for you. In the example of the sophomore talking to the senior, do you think that, so this leadership model, I guess where I'm trying to go is like, when I think about that example in college, I could see where it could work because of what's created or how. So let's imagine like in professional sports, could that, like, how could that play out? Is there too much ego involved because of salaries and all that stuff that's eliminated in this model? Or do you think that could hold up where, like, the 7th guy could say to LeBron James, hustle back or something like that? What are your thoughts? Or maybe you haven't given a thought on that. I don't know.
No, I think it's an interesting question. It's probably, it's probably magnified at the professional level because of the money that's involved. I would say though, if you create the model the right way, your best player shouldn't have an ego about it, right? If your best player has an ego about being told the right thing to do, your problem's probably deeper than your leadership model. And I think you have to really enforce it, right? I don't think it's any different because I think if a sophomore on your team screamed at a senior, in tomorrow's practice to run back, you might have an argument, might be like, man, why are you talking to me that way? Like, you don't talk to me. But that's where you have to step in and say, wait a minute, what's the problem? Like, why is it why is it okay for you to yell at him to run back and it's not okay for him to yell at you? Like, we're all primary stakeholders here, right? We're all invested in this the same way. So I think it can work at any level. I really do. I think it, like anything, you need to get buy-in from everybody and you need to explain it clearly. If you have to explain it to LeBron James, look, if you're allowed to jog back on defense and he's not allowed to say anything about it, like, what type of leader are you?
Mhm.
What type of team is this going to be? So, but it's a challenge without question, right? I don't mean by any means say, okay, everybody, go do this tomorrow and you're not going to have some issues. Because again, I think most players are brought up on the traditional leadership model. I think a lot of players enjoy, you hear it a lot, like, okay, this is my team now. When you go from being a sophomore to a junior and it's like those other guys graduated, like, this is my team now, and it's like, it's this status gain. So it is absolutely a challenge, but I think it'll work at any level. Now, it's interesting though, there's still chain of command, and chain of command is still important. So that's something that's, when it comes to program decision making, like, I'm the head coach, right? So it's not just, okay, everybody show up and start giving your own opinion and doing your own thing, and we'll all, meet in the middle at some point and see if we can put a team together, right? Like, there are times, and that goes back to the communication model, you can't come out of a huddle and have 5 different guys saying, okay, hey guys, here's what I think, right? Like, And that has to be worked out within your team. And look, my general feel is that it usually does. It usually works itself out pretty easily, but it's something you do have to work on. It's something you have to communicate about. There is still a hierarchy, there is still a chain of command. The head coach is going to make the decisions. The assistant coaches are going to make sure they carry out the message, and that will develop within your team. Now, for me, when Anton Gray was a freshman, he needed to be at the top of that, that ladder in a huddle with 5 minutes to go when we were playing Keene State. And I think the guys recognized that. And over time, I had to make sure they did. So yeah, it's an interesting question. So any other thoughts or comments? This is just some of the stuff that I've sort of found going through this that I think are like trap doors, landmines, so to speak, that you can get into as a head coach, and things that I learned were really important as a leadership approach through this model, and some basically mistakes that I've made. The first one is it was my second year. We were really good. We ended up going to the Elite Eight. We were like 7-1. We're playing Coast Guard in December. This is at Rhode Island College, and we were just awful. Like, we played terrible. We're down 19 in the first half. I called 3 timeouts, and like, I'm ready to just kill somebody, feel terrible. And, I called a timeout, tried to settle them down, called another timeout, kind of ripped into them like, hey, let's go. We got to get, and realize that, inserting my own negative emotion into the situation was only making it worse. And, the third time out I called and I just started laughing. It was just like, guys, I don't know what you guys ate for breakfast today. Like, I don't know what's going on right now. I know the team that has been practicing for 2 months, that's really good. And this isn't us. So, hey, Cam, how about that pass you just threw out of bounds? Like, where did that come from? Like making jokes and like really getting what I felt out of the equation and kind of trying to give my team what they need. And I think it's a mistake we make a lot, is we coach what we feel instead of what our team needs. You design a great backdoor play out of a timeout. It works perfectly. Your freshman makes a back cut, catches it, and blows the layup, right? And everybody feels awful. And you just want, make the layup. Come on, probably what you're feeling, not what he needs at that point. So that's something that I, have sort of discovered. The mental side of the game, I just think is so overlooked and undercoached. I think if it's going on in their head and it's affecting the way they play, then you need to know about it and you need to coach it. And I think the old days of like, we'll shut up and play, just doesn't work. There is so much stuff that can get in their head. Some of the examples I use, like, I think as coaches, we make way too big a deal about playing on the road. And I think it becomes a self-fulfilling thing. It's like, I never, ever say to my team, especially on the road, or you're not going to get that call on the road, or, you're going to have to speak up. We're going to be on the road, right? I think everything we do is to train our guys to win tough games and to win tough games on the road. But my first year as a head coach, I realized, like, we would go up to Keene State and get blasted, and then we come back home and and we win by 15, and they kind of laid down. And like, I just think teams in our league had this mentality that like playing on the road is supposed to be hard. So I didn't want to talk about it. Another one is, it's hard to beat a team 3 times, right? I don't know if you've heard that, said it, talked about it, right? You beat a team twice and then you got to play them in the playoffs. And it's like, man, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. Well, over 10 years in college basketball, I think the winning percentage of the team that won the first 2 games is like 74% in the third game, right? So it's actually just not true that it's hard to beat a team 3 times. But we speak it into existence, and mentally, you see it in the NFL when teams are going to the playoffs. We still say it at Prime. We said it last year, man, it's hard to beat a team 3 times. And like, it actually isn't. It's actually easy to beat a team 3 times if you're better. We were in that situation when I was at Rhode Island College 12 times. We were 11-1 in those games. We were in that situation on the other side of it when I was at Maine, right? 4 times. And we were 0-4 in those situations, right? Where we had lost the first 2. So, I'm now 16-1 on either side of the ledger when it comes to, beating a team 3 times. So,
that's analytic proof right there.
well, yeah, I mean, it's just statistics. Like it's literally numbers. Like it happens 75% of the time. Body language is an interesting one to me. And I always have good discussions. Like I find myself coaching the personality more than coaching the behavior. You have an image of a certain kid and maybe he's a little bit lazy, or maybe he's always challenging you on stuff. And, if a great kid who's a leader, who you love, who does everything right, makes a mistake, you kind of give him a pass for it. But if that kid who's a little bit lazy or maybe not as bought in does it, you hammer him for it. And really you're coaching the personality of the player, and you're not coaching the behavior. If Timmy did that, would we be just as upset, or would our response be the same? And, body language to me is something coaches get caught up on all the time. And I don't consider body language to be behavior. It might lead to behavior. It might be a sign that certain behavior is coming. But to me, body language is hard to decipher. I've had kids, Terrell Hill is a kid I mentioned who was, played for me my first 4 years at Rhode Island College, was a freshman on my first team, and he's a Hall of Famer, 1,200 points, first team All-League twice. He was a competitive kid, and man, when he came out of a game, like he showed you with his body language that he didn't want to come out, and we were playing Coast Guard in the NCAA tournament my first year, and I had left him in the game too long, and he was tired, and he threw up a couple of bricks, and I took him out with like 6 minutes to go in a close game, and he was clearly frustrated. Now, if I had paid too much attention to his body language and got frustrated myself and said, you know what, we can't count on you, and like we probably would have lost the game. I just, Rel, you're tired, just sit down, take a couple of minutes. And then he went back in the game and he helped us win. He hit some shots, and I'm just not a big believer that body language tells us as much as we think. And maybe it's because I'm not good at it. I get it wrong a lot. The whole negative body language thing to me, like I'm more concerned about the behavior. And I would also challenge you to, check out your own body language on the sideline, as a coach. Check out, how do you react physically when something goes wrong? I know that one usually touches a nerve, because I know a lot of coaches are they hate to see negative body language. I don't know. What anybody have any thoughts on that? Is that something that's important to you, that you think about, that you let go?
Is that just if it's a negative thing? So does it ever go back to your definition of like, are you making people better when you come off and pout or throw a chair? Because you know what I mean? Is it just like part of a follow-up conversation on how that person's leading? Or do you really just kind of overlook it and allow people to, not allow them, but just let them be themselves? And if they're frustrated because they had to come out, they care and they didn't want to come out of the game, and you just sort of, is it ever part of how they're leading, I guess?
I think it is. And I would say this, I use it to ask them questions, right? I use it as a sign. Hey, you all right? Everything good? I just don't know that I don't make any decisions based on it, right? I don't, you know, I'm not going to throw a kid out of practice because, you know, he shows frustration in his body language, or I'm not going to leave him on the bench because when he came out, you know, his shoulders slumped, and, you know, now it can tell you some things, certainly, but I don't, you know, I'm not gonna make decisions based on it. Hey, Rel, you know, you all right? Can we count on you? Yeah, coach, I'm good. I just, okay. All right. Catch your breath, you know? So I don't want to say it doesn't speak to you. I just don't, try not to overreact to it. I don't want to make decisions based on it. Because a lot of times I get it wrong, quite honestly. You know, a lot of times I think it's like, and I think ego comes into play there. Like, if I take him out of the game and he shows displeasure, he's showing me up in front of the fans, or whatever it is. Like, you know, it's like I'm in charge. So I think it can be, I think it can show you something, just like, you know, look, positive emotion can be, you know, over the top positive emotion can tell you like, all right, I gotta rein these guys in right now. I just try not to make decisions based on it.
Yeah, I agree. I get it wrong too. I was curious.
It's hard, isn't it? I just think
Yeah.
it's hard. Like, you know, half the time I'm like, you know, you think he's being a bad teammate and doing this and that, and then it's like, yeah, no, he's frustrated because he missed a couple of shots and he blew a defensive assignment. It's like, well, you know, is that bad body language, or am I glad that he cares? You know,
Yeah.
it's a pretty fine line.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just find it, you know.
I think I like how you said you followed up with the questions to find out the place that they're at. Because I mean, I have to stick to I'm always one who says I'd rather calm someone down than hype them up. So with that being said, I can't get all upset if they need to be calmed down or they show quote unquote too much emotion. But that's what I would do. I do the check-in because, you know, hopefully we're building those relationships with our players that we really know. We can tell because
Right.
we know them and what they say that, yeah, he's okay. He just needs that minute. I'll get him back in. Or she's okay. She just had this happen. She just needs that minute. Or she's not okay. And then it's like
Right.
a different thing. Yeah.
It's getting to know them. And part of it is, you know, I mean, if he's such a great competitor and he cares so much, it's going to be hard not to show any emotion, right? So if he shows emotion the right way, we say, hey, that's what I'm talking about. But if it, you know, so, and again, I go back to the way we operate as coaches, right? I don't know that we always, you
Show
know,
no emotion.
yeah, it's do as I say, not what I do, right? I mean, our body language, I mean, I certainly, at our level, it's embarrassing, quite honestly, you know.
Hey, how do you not to go too tangent here, but I'm curious because a lot of people, when they're recruiting kids, talk about body language or bad body language, or, you know, could get off of a kid because of that. Like, how do you?
I'll take them all. Give me all of them. If they can play, I'm fine. You know, send them my way. Like you know, we joke about it. It's like, all right, yeah, you know, you give me the average player who's a good body language kid. I'll take the talented kid with bad body language, and let's see where we end up. You know, that's my thought. Now look.
Now we know why you won games.
Yeah, well, you know, I I think about some of the you know, Mason Choice, who played for Coach Saris. Like, part of what made him great was the edge that he competed with, right? I mean, he had this personality that was ferocious on the basketball court, and sometimes that, you know, was expressed in a way that might be considered, you know, gee, he got a little too over the top sometimes, and you know, but there was this, you know, this confidence and this edge to him that other guys fed off of. And man, if I told them to like, you know, and again, I'm not advocating like let them be an asshole. You know, he wasn't, you know, that's not where I'm going. But yeah, like if I'm watching a kid now look, if he doesn't respond to his coach, that's different. You know, that's there's certain things, you know, I'm not saying just, you know, I want renegades, but you know, if a kid gets a little frustrated and expresses it the wrong way because, you know, things didn't go his way, you know, I'm not crossing them off the list for that. I'll tell you that. I mean, I'm not. I just think overall we make too big a deal out of it. And the kid, how about the kids that don't show anything and are kind of smooth out there? but like, do they, it's like, oh, does he really care? Do we, we're kind of, again, we're evaluating like what we think of the personality. And it's like, well, man, he brings it every day and he's really productive and he's really good. I mean, it works both ways too.
Mhm.
So,
Yep. Good point. Good point.
yeah,
I
interesting.
was going to ask, as you develop the leadership kind of model and your philosophy in it, how much has it changed? But I guess not too much, as long as they're talented.
No, I mean, honestly, I would say the core of it hasn't. Like I believe in the idea of empowering everybody, like, and giving up control, and that's that I believe in, right? I think you're going to get more out of your team and your players by giving up control than by taking control, right? Seek out ownership and not compliance, right? I think so many of us, we want we teach our teams to do what they're told, right? Jump through that hoop and okay, they go jump through that hoop. Good. And compliant teams can be good, especially if you're a good coach and you have good players. Compliant teams that can be good. The elite teams that I've been around take ownership, right? And that creates you to give it to them, to create the space for them to take it. That part I really, really believe in. Like, team to team, it can be very different, right? Some teams have been very good with more responsibility. The best teams I've coached are like, you blow the whistle in shell drill because somebody gets beat middle, and before it falls out of your mouth, 3 guys are going, nope, no middle, do it again, not good enough. You don't have to say anything, right? Other teams don't necessarily have that. Some of the teams like Cam Stewart's team that I've referenced when he was a senior, those guys didn't really have that vocal side of it where they got frustrated when things didn't work. So my approach needed to be a little bit different, right? I gave them as much control as I could, but when it came down to making sure it was done right, it really had to come from me. So I would say it's evolved a lot, and it will continue to. The core of it to me is creating ownership and giving up control, and sort of distancing yourself from the results, and getting your team to buy into what you're doing every day and how you're going about it, as opposed to, what they see on the scoreboard. So yeah, that's kind of my model. I think to me, the best part about what we do is we teach team, right? I mean, team is not taught, at New Haven or at Williams or at, some of that, like, they don't have professors who teach team. We get to teach team. And I think team is what, makes great things happen, right? Like, we're going to solve this virus at some point through teams of experts who work together to come up with a vaccine and figure this out. So, that to me is what's really special. And I think year after year, I mean, one of the things I've learned is I'm coaching a different team every year, right? The idea that, okay, we only lost one senior, we got everybody back. Like, my first year's team, we won 19 games. Second year, we went to the Elite Eight. We only lost one player off that team. We added one great player. Everybody else was the same. But now the juniors are now seniors, right? The freshmen they went from being freshmen and figuring it out and contributing to coming back as sophomores. And they feel like, okay, I want to be a starter, right? I want to be all league. I think I can do this. The levels of sacrifice are different. My confidence as a coach is different. So that's a roundabout way of saying I think the core of it, of the approach, stays the same, and you have to be really flexible within it based on your team. I mean, you may have a group that can't handle choosing captains the way, or you may have a team at New Haven where you say, you know what, this team needs a couple of captains this year. Like, we have so many guys that really are off on their own, and we have 2 guys that are are really bought in and can bring this team together, you know, that may change, you know, even though that's not what you guys do. So I think that's, I think it's important to be flexible within whatever model you choose.
Coach, I'm curious how the model has differentiated at levels. And so I think, you know, the first coach I heard, I don't know, maybe the first coach that I heard that said this, like Tom Izzo was the first person attributed to, like, player coach teams, essentially are better than coach teams, right? The most successful teams. And that's you're empowering the middle and the whole thing. And my whole experience, 20 years as a player and coach is all at the Division three level. And so that's my referencing, and that's where my bias is. And so we've always thought that too. I've always thought that, again, it's so important to have such good leadership and to empower those leaders, because it's so important at our level where essentially as coaches, we can't work with our players from, we'll just call it April 1st until October 15th. Right. And so you have to have that player coached. You have to have that great leadership within your team. And I'm just curious as to now your experience, obviously Division three and then high major, mid-major level two at Division one, how consistent that is from level to level from your standpoint.
It's a great question. I think, and this, I think somewhat relates to what you're saying. I think a trap that we fall into a lot as coaches is, yeah, that's all great, but I can't do that here, right? Or I can't do that at this level. It's like, yeah, that would work, but I'm a high school coach and my kids are idiots and I got to tell them what to do, or, yeah, that might work at Division three, but Division one, I mean, these guys have big egos. So I think that's a cop out just in general, sort of the whole like level. I've never found that the level mattered, right? I think it would have worked great with our team at Providence last year. And the guy that I work for has a very different approach to leadership than I do. So it's really interesting. I mean, it's not, without being so crude, he's like, fuck that. We're telling them what to do. Like I'm in charge, like that's, so, which is like, and it's worked, and, the kids respond. Do I think it would be even better if we did it? I do, but, I don't think the level really makes a huge difference. I think the investment you put into it and the buy-in that you get from your team is what matters. Now, if you're coaching in the NBA and you have a max player who says, yeah, screw that, like I'm not buying, like that may be a different deal. I had teams at Rhode Island College that were really good, tended to be on the younger side, that I probably got less out of because I should have taken more control looking back, that my third year, that year where Antone was a freshman, we were really, really talented. We had lost a bunch of guys off Elite 18, but replaced them with a bunch of talented newcomers. And we relied on our talent most of the year, and it was chaos, right? It was like I was trying to figure out, and we had freshmen trying to lead, and I hadn't really established anything. So there are certainly teams where I feel like, yeah, you might have to take more control, or you might have to, give up more control. It's easier to do with certain teams. I haven't noticed, my kids at Maine responded really well to it. I would say one of the challenges was, at Rick, I took over the best team in the league. At Maine, I took over the worst team in the league. So the buy-in happened quicker because we were experiencing success with it. And before the guys had even figured out or thought about it, we were winning games. Whereas at Maine, we were never winning games. So it became harder. I think something that's really, really cool about it. And so coaching as a head coach at the Division III level was something that you mentioned, right? They get 7 months on their own, and you get 5 months in the gym with them. So I completely separated for those 7 months. Like, we didn't have a workout plan. They didn't have to check in. I wasn't peeking into the gym. There was no sign up sheet on my door. It was just, hey guys, if we want to be good, like, you're going to stay in great shape and this is what we're going to have to do. I thought that separation in the off season created a ton of ownership for that, helped sort of show me that this model could work. I think that's something that's really cool about the Division III level, even as uncomfortable as it makes you, because it's like, okay, I'm not going to coach this team for, till October 15th. I think there's a lot of value in allowing them to take ownership of the offseason and figure it out themselves. What else? Any other questions or thoughts? I don't even know what time it is or where we're at, but
Oh, hey, Coach, don't worry about time. We're early in the
Okay.
night.
All right.
I'm in control tonight, so Jonah, I lost track of time. I apologize.
No, that's all right.
I have one for you. How
yeah.
about developing staff as leaders in their roles as assistants, and then also hopefully helping to develop them, because 99.9% want to go on to be head coaches. How does your model work, or what have you done, or what's your process for that?
Yeah, it's great. So I think you have to be really, really invested in developing your staff, just like you would developing your players, and being intentional about it, right? So I think one of the issues that our business has is there's really no training for advancement in the business, right? It's just you try and get on with somebody, you get an assistant job, and then hopefully you can hang on. You pick what you like, you pick what you don't like, and you see if you can move up. There's no formal training in it. So I think you have to talk to your staff about where they want to be. You have to recognize that they don't want to be with you. Nobody wants to be my assistant for the rest of their lives. If they do, I don't think they're going to be very good at it. You have to be willing as a leader to, to help them grow, to move on. We literally had what we called Who Fridays every Friday, which was, going through your who list, your list of contacts, connections for an hour every Friday, and send them a note, stay in touch with them, the people that will help you, get your next job. That was something that we did 1 hour a week. And that, I think, showed them that I was really invested in their future. I think hiring a staff, you want to hire people who are strong where you are weak. So getting them to recognize what they're really good at. Hey, you're really good at player development. You're really good in the gym. You're really good with connecting with the players. You need to work on understanding X's and O's better. You need to work on breaking down film better, or you need to work on relationships and recruiting better, or whatever it is. And then I think one of the worst things you can do as a head coach is undermine your staff in front of your team. Like if it's hey, if you're, hey, what the hell are we doing, guys? Like, why are we, you've got to give them confidence, encourage them, support them, just like you would players, and let them, I learned when I was, so as a Division III head coach, you're lucky if you have an assistant who's there at practice, right? Maybe you have one or two, some days, none, right? So it's hard to say, okay, you've got 20 minutes with the guards, you've got 20 minutes with the bigs, my voice became too dominant, and I always wanted that, like, I wanted them responding to my voice. Like, that was intentional, but it also became like, that's where we got to being compliant, where it was always my voice they heard, and it became, well, wait for coach to tell me what to do. I think you can empower your assistants to help you be a better leader and help your team get better, by giving them responsibility, but also developing them as coaches to take on responsibility. Like, okay, here are the drills that you're going to run. when they go to speak up, it's not, hey coach, hey, can I say something? It's like, yeah, no, you start talking like I'm blowing the whistle. Hey, listen up, coach is talking, treat them with respect. Look, as I've said, I think the leadership dynamic is so much bigger than we ever think about until we become head coaches. So encouraging them to develop their own leadership approach, I think is really important.
Anybody else? Because I have like 50 questions. I don't get to talk to coach that often as much as I want to.
TV, you can call me, I mean, I'm not going
No, I
anywhere.
know.
So
Well, right now I can't call you because I'm parenting 3 young kids and trying to work in this crisis and all this stuff. It's craziness, I'll ask you this one, and then if nobody else has any, we can let you get out of here. Just with the availability that you've had to talk to leaders, not just in sports, but across, all platforms with your podcast and your academy, what are like 2 to 3 commonalities or things that you've discovered or believed that have made successful leaders successful?
It's a great question. And you know what? It's like the best question to ever ask at a clinic. Like what's, one thing that you've done, whoever you're talking to, whatever the coach is, like, what's one thing that you've done that you feel separates you from the group? I would say a curiosity in others and a curiosity for learning, I think is really, really important. It's a mentality, it's an interest in development of others. It's an interest in understanding others. It's sort of a selfless view of the world. What can I learn from them and how can I help them? That's number one. I would say the other word I use all the time in the highest performers I've ever seen is perspective. It's an intentional approach or attitude. It's not just, oh, you have a good attitude. It's an intentional attitude that you take towards your craft where, it's understanding what's important. It's being able to having a relationship with failure, right? Which we're all going to deal with. It is not taking yourself too seriously. Man, are we good at that as coaches? Like taking ourselves too seriously. Like, I don't know that I mean, I just feel in general where, we all, it's like, like today I practice and my, young kids and this and that. And it's like, it's like we always project this image that like what we're doing is so challenging and so hard. And I would say on that sort of bend is they've gotten over themselves, right? There's a lack of ego, a lack of self-importance, an understanding that they can learn just as much, from their team and the people around them and the experiences they're going to have as they can teach. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. Anybody else with any last questions for Coach?
Well, I appreciate the conversation, TV, and everybody. My information is on there, so please do send me an email or tweet at me or whatever. Stay in touch, and I look forward to getting on a few more of these. I appreciate being on it. Sometimes the timing hasn't worked out, but
yeah, we're playing games now or having practices, right?
We'll see.
Hey, listen, how long? What are the chances you get the academy going virtually here in the spring?
I'm going to do it next year. So I was going to do it at Providence next year, and then COVID hit. And by the time I thought about doing it virtually, but probably in the spring, we'll have it back. And I actually have a book coming out probably in a couple of weeks. I wrote a book about the culture that we built at Rhode Island College and the kind of the leadership lessons, a lot of what we've talked about. So you can see that way. It's entitled "The Nothing" is the name of the book. So yeah, hoping to have the Leadership Academy running, in the spring. If not in person, if by May or June we can have it in person, we'll do it. If not, we'll do it virtually.
Perfect. That sounds great. Hey, thank you everyone for participating tonight. Coach, thanks again for spending the time with us and just imparting so much knowledge on us. Just a couple of things, a quick heads up that it's a short turnaround for our 8th and final conversation of season 2, which will take place this Monday, November 23rd. Jonah will send the link for the video from tonight in the next few days, as well as the contact list. Coach, can you, your presentation, can you email that to Jonah?
Absolutely.
Okay, and we'll
Yeah.
get that out. And then just let us know if anybody has any questions. Thank you all. And if for those of you that don't make the call on Monday for some reason live, everybody, let's have a happy Thanksgiving. And let's, after all we've dealt with this year, let's really focus in on trying to find something that we are thankful for and celebrate that this Thanksgiving.
Sure.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Coach. Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks, Coach
Thanks,
Walsh.
Coach. Thanks, man.
Coach Walsh, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.